the president made what are widely called unusual, perhaps unprecedented remarks in the modern era. And I'm going to show you exactly what he said and why military veterans and many other experts on a nonpartisan basis say this is one of those inflection points you need to confront. It is unusual to gather this many members of the military in peacetime. The president made this public address so everyone can see and hear what he is saying to the military. And he explicitly said this military under this Trump administration must better focus on attacking, quote, the enemy within.
American constitutional system operates on a principle that seems simple until it is tested. No person, not even the president, stands above accountability. That principle is being tested now in ways that most legal scholars believed belonged to hypothetical exercises rather than actual governance, because what is unfolding in Washington is not a standard political dispute between parties. It is a confrontation over whether the mechanisms designed to constrain presidential power can function when the president refuses to recognize their legitimacy.
The 25th Amendment is of zero risk to me, but will come back to haunt Joe Biden and the Biden administration. As the expression goes, be careful what you wish for.
Donald Trump has made a decision. He will not resign. Not under pressure from Democrats, not in response to calls invoking the 25th Amendment, not if articles of impeachment are filed, not if his mental fitness is questioned publicly by members of Congress. The decision is absolute, and he has communicated it clearly to Republican lawmakers in private meetings. If Democrats believe they can force him out, they are mistaken. He will fight every institutional attempt to remove him, and he will use every tool available to the executive branch to do so.
Referring to the video, President Trump writing, seditious behavior from traitors, lock them up, and seditious behavior punishable by death. Later reposting a comment in which someone wrote, quote, hang them, George Washington would. Democrats condemning the comments, calling for extra security for the members involved.
This is perhaps the most reckless, irresponsible thing that he has done all Congress, and it's going to get a lot of us killed. We have kids.
According to reporting from the Washington Post, published on February 13th, Trump's Justice Department has moved to indict 6 Democratic members of Congress, 6 sitting lawmakers. The alleged crime is not bribery, not classified document mishandling, not financial corruption. The charge, as described in the reporting, centers on their public statements urging government officials and members of the military to resist orders from the president that those lawmakers believe would be unconstitutional.
Donald Trump shared a post on Truth Social calling for Democratic members of Congress to be hanged. He also posted a message that said, seditious behavior, punishable by death. Let's be crystal clear. The President of the United States is calling for the execution of elected officials. This is an outright threat, and it's deadly serious. We have already seen what happens when Donald Trump tells his followers that his political opponents are enemies of the state. Every time Donald Trump posts things like this, he makes political violence more likely. None of us should tolerate this kind of behavior.
Members of Congress are being targeted for criminal prosecution because they exercise their First Amendment right to criticize the president and to encourage others to follow the Constitution rather than illegal directives. This is not a hypothetical scenario from a dystopian novel. This is happening. The Justice Department of the United States, an institution that is supposed to operate independently of political influence, is being directed to treat political speech as a criminal act. And the implications of that decision extend far beyond the 6 lawmakers currently in the crosshairs.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk. This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
To understand why this represents such a dangerous inflection point, you need to understand what those lawmakers actually said. They did not incite violence. They did not coordinate criminal activity. They did not leak classified information. What they did was speak publicly in their capacity as elected representatives about their concerns regarding Trump's directives. Some urged military officers to remember their oath to the Constitution. Others called on civil servants to refuse orders they believed violated the law. Still others encouraged resistance to what they characterized as authoritarian overreach. That kind of speech has always been protected. It is core political expression. It is exactly what the First Amendment exists to safeguard lawmakers criticizing executive actions and urging fidelity to constitutional principles is not just permissible. It is essential to the functioning of a republic with separated powers. But Trump has decided that such speech constitutes a crime. And in doing so, he has crossed a line that previous presidents, even those accused of serious abuses, did not cross. He is using the coercive power of federal prosecution to silence political opposition within the legislative branch. The mechanics of how this is happening are worth examining because they reveal the systematic nature of the threat. Trump did not merely suggest that these lawmakers should face consequences. He issued directives. He tasked his attorney general with building cases. And the Justice Department, which is supposed to exercise prosecutorial discretion based on evidence and legal merit, complied. Some of the lawmakers targeted only learned of their status as subjects of criminal investigation when the news leaked to the press. They were not contacted by the DOJ beforehand. They were not informed through official channels. They discovered they were facing potential federal charges by reading about it in newspapers. That procedural irregularity is itself revealing. It suggests a process driven not by careful legal analysis, but by political instruction, a rush to file charges before the legal justification has been fully developed. And Trump has been amplifying the pressure publicly. He has called these lawmakers traitors in speeches and social media posts. He has suggested that treason merits severe punishment. His supporters have responded predictably, issuing threats against the targeted representatives. Some of those threats have been specific enough that Capitol Police have had to increase security details. This creates a climate of fear that operates independently of whether the indictments ultimately succeed, even if the charges are eventually dismissed, and many legal experts believe they would be found unconstitutional. The process itself inflicts damage. The lawmakers face legal fees that can reach into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. They endure stress that affects their health and their families. They become targets for harassment and violence. And the message sent to every other member of Congress is unmistakable. Criticize the president at your own peril. That is the point. Trump is not trying to secure convictions. He is trying to change behavior. If he can make criticism of the president so costly that lawmakers think twice before speaking out, he achieves his goal even if the prosecutions fail. The process becomes the punishment, and the chilling effect on political speech becomes the victory. The legal theory underlying these potential indictments has not been made fully public, but based on what has leaked, it appears to rest on an expansive interpretation of incitement and sedition statutes. The argument, as best as can be reconstructed from reporting, is that by urging resistance to presidential orders, the lawmakers were encouraging insubordination that could undermine military discipline and executive authority. That argument is extraordinarily weak. Courts have consistently held that political speech, even speech that encourages civil disobedience or institutional resistance, is protected unless it meets a very high threshold. It must be directed at inciting imminent lawless action, and it must be likely to produce such action. Telling military officers to remember their constitutional oath does not meet that standard. Encouraging officials to refuse illegal orders does not meet that standard. These are not calls for violence or immediate disruption. They are expressions of political opposition and constitutional interpretation. But the weakness of the legal theory may not matter in the short term because Trump is not operating within normal legal constraints. He has appointed loyalists to key positions within the Justice Department precisely so that political considerations can override legal ones, and he is counting on the fact that federal judges, even those who might ultimately rule against him, move slowly. The wheels of justice turn at a pace measured in months and years, not days. During that time, the intimidation effect persists. What makes this particularly insidious is that it targets the one branch of government specifically designed to check executive power. Congress exists to provide oversight of the presidency. The founders understood that without legislative scrutiny, presidents would inevitably overreach. They gave Congress tools, the power of the purse, the power to investigate, the power to impeach. But all of those tools depend on lawmakers being willing to use them. And if using them results in criminal prosecution, the balance of power collapses. Consider what happens if this strategy succeeds even partially. If lawmakers become afraid to criticize the president, investigations stop. Oversight hearings become performative rather than probing. Impeachment becomes unthinkable. The executive branch operates without meaningful constraint, and the United States moves from a system of separated powers to one in which the presidency dominates the other branches through intimidation and legal coercion. Trump's calculus is clear. He views the 2026 midterm elections as existential. If Democrats win control of the House of Representatives, they will almost certainly move to impeach him. Multiple Democratic lawmakers have already stated publicly that impeachment would be among their first priorities. Trump knows this, and he is attempting to preempt it by creating an environment where Democratic lawmakers are too threatened to act. He has told Republican allies in private meetings that he expects a Democratic House to file articles of impeachment, but he has also made clear that he will not go quietly. He will contest the charges. He will use executive privilege to block witnesses and documents. He will direct his Justice Department to investigate those leading the impeachment effort. And he will mobilize his political base to pressure Republican senators not to convict. This is not a legal strategy. It is a political one. Trump is not arguing that impeachment would be unconstitutional or that the charges would lack merit. He is arguing that he has sufficient power and support to survive it. And he is betting that Republicans, even those who privately harbor doubts about his fitness for office, will not break ranks when it matters. That bet may prove correct. Trump has survived 2 impeachments already. In both cases, Republican senators chose to acquit even when the evidence of misconduct was substantial. Some voted to acquit because they genuinely believed the charges did not warrant removal. Others voted to acquit because they feared political retribution from Trump and his base. The result was the same. Trump remained in office, and the precedent was set that impeachment as a practical matter cannot remove a president whose party controls the Senate. But Trump is not leaving even that to chance by going after Democratic lawmakers now before the midterms. He is attempting to ensure that even if Democrats win the House, they will be too intimidated to act. And he is signaling to Republicans that loyalty will be rewarded and dissent will be punished. Some Republicans in Congress are beginning to recognize the danger. They see that an executive branch willing to prosecute Democratic lawmakers today could just as easily prosecute Republican lawmakers tomorrow if they step out of line. The principle being established is that political opposition to the president can be criminalized, and once that principle is accepted, no one in Congress is safe. But recognizing the danger and acting on it are different things. So far, Republican opposition to Trump's DOJ tactics has been muted at best. A few senators have expressed concern in carefully worded statements. None have introduced legislation to constrain prosecutorial overreach. None have held hearings to investigate whether political considerations are driving charging decisions, and none have publicly stated that they would refuse to support a president who weaponizes the Justice Department against Congress. That silence is enabling. It signals to Trump that he can continue escalating without facing meaningful resistance from his own party. And it signals to Democrats that they are on their own. That institutional norms and constitutional principles will not be defended by Republicans when doing so requires confronting Trump. The question of whether the 25th Amendment could or should be invoked has also entered the conversation. That amendment allows for the removal of a president who is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. It requires the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare the president incapacitated. If the president contests that determination, Congress must vote, and a two-thirds majority in both chambers is required to sustain the removal. Democrats have pointed to Trump's erratic behavior, his obsession with what they describe as a delusional plan to annex Greenland, and his increasingly authoritarian rhetoric as evidence that he is mentally unfit. Senator Ed Markey has called explicitly for invoking the 25th Amendment. Representatives like Eric Swalwell have echoed that call, but the 25th Amendment is not a realistic option here, not because Trump is clearly fit. Reasonable people can disagree on that question, but because the mechanism depends entirely on the willingness of the vice president to act, J.D. Vance is not going to declare Trump incapacitated. Vance owes his political career to Trump. He has been unfailingly loyal, and he has shown no indication that he views Trump's behavior as disqualifying. Without Vance's cooperation, the 25th Amendment is a dead letter. Trump's cabinet members, all of whom serve at his pleasure, are not going to initiate a process that would end his presidency and likely destroy their own careers. So, while Democrats can call for the 25th Amendment's use, those calls are largely symbolic. They serve to signal that Trump's fitness is in question, but they do not provide a viable path to removal. That leaves impeachment as the only constitutional mechanism available. An impeachment requires first winning the House in November, and second, convincing two-thirds of the Senate to convict. The first is possible. The second, based on current political alignments, is highly unlikely, which means that the real battle is not legal, but political. It is a battle over public opinion, over turnout, over whether voters in competitive districts decide that Trump's authoritarian tactics are disqualifying. And Trump knows this, which is why he is working so aggressively to suppress opposition, to intimidate critics, and to make the cost of resisting him so high that people choose silence instead. The stakes of the November elections have therefore escalated dramatically. They are no longer simply about policy preferences or party control. They are about whether the system of checks and balances can be restored or whether executive power will continue to expand unchecked. If Republicans retain the House, Trump will interpret that as a mandate to continue and escalate his current approach. If Democrats win, a confrontation becomes inevitable. But even if Democrats win the House and file articles of impeachment, conviction in the Senate remains a steep climb. It would require not just a handful of Republican senators, but at least 17 of them to vote to remove Trump. That has never happened. No president has ever been removed through impeachment. And Trump, for all his vulnerabilities, retains strong support among Republican voters, which gives Republican senators a powerful incentive to protect him. So the most likely outcome, even in a scenario where Democrats control the House and impeach Trump, is that he remains in office. And once he survives a third impeachment, the president becomes even more entrenched. Presidents cannot be removed through the constitutional process designed for that purpose. The tool ceases to function, and future presidents observing that Trump faced no consequences for any of his actions will feel emboldened to push boundaries even further. This is the trajectory, not a sudden collapse into dictatorship, but a gradual erosion of constraints. Each norm violated without consequence makes the next violation easier. Each abuse of power that goes unpunished becomes precedent, and each time Congress fails to check executive overreach, the balance of power shifts further toward the presidency. The courts could intervene. If the indictments against Democratic lawmakers proceed, those cases will be challenged on First Amendment grounds, and it is possible, perhaps even likely, that judges will find the prosecutions unconstitutional. But court cases take time, and during that time, the chilling effect operates. Lawmakers see their colleagues facing prosecution and think twice before speaking out. The damage is done before the legal remedy arrives. There is also no guarantee that all courts will rule against Trump. The federal judiciary includes judges appointed specifically for their deference to executive power. Some of those judges have shown a willingness to interpret presidential authority broadly and to defer to claims of national security or executive privilege. if the case ends up before judges sympathetic to Trump's view of executive power, the outcome becomes less certain. What this moment reveals is a fundamental weakness in the American constitutional system. It depends on people in power choosing to respect limits. The Constitution provides mechanisms for accountability, but those mechanisms only work if officials are willing to use them. If a president refuses to resign, if his party refuses to hold him accountable, if his appointees in the Justice Department follow political directives rather than legal principles, the system does not self-correct. It requires external pressure, public opinion, electoral consequences, mass mobilization to force correction. And that pressure must be sustained. One election is not enough. One protest is not enough. Accountability requires continuous effort over months and years. It requires voters staying engaged, lawmakers staying courageous, and institutions resisting capture. That is exhausting. It is not the way people want politics to work, but it is the reality. When the normal guardrails fail, Trump is counting on exhaustion.